Hello. Oh, okay. I'm unmuted. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am back with Troll.
Howdy.
And we're going to be talking about the devil.
One of our most controversial spirits, I think, in the craft.
The devil we know.
The devil we know. Exactly.
We know.
Yeah.
So we have some notes for our stream today that we're going to kind of be like piggybacking off of, not necessarily following it as like a set script, but just kind of having it here. And we were going to first kind of start off with talking about the unholy trinity, which I've made a video about this that I don't think I've released yet, but I will be releasing soon. But we're going to talk a little bit about this like kind of concept here. So the unholy trinity like is kind of used as like almost a colloquial term to refer to Satan, Lucifer, and the devil, who are very much viewed as a trinity in their own way. These are three very separate like names and entities that often I think kind of get combined all into one. And I think if that's your approach, if you see them all as like a 3-in-1 sort of like soft polytheist view, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you see them all three as separate, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that's really my place or anyone's place to say, you know, how necessarily they need to be viewed. I think understanding like each unholy name's, you know, unique characteristics kind of paints a vibe of like what we're working with. So like when I refer to the unholy trinity in the form of Satan, I'm very much talking about like the Hebrew ha-satan, or like the adversarial, the accuser, a title of the one and many who rule hell, like a king almost, an infernal king. When I'm referring to Lucifer, I'm typically pulling from that fallen angel gnosis. I'm pulling from like the Etruscan god Lucifer as well. So like kind of a delicious mix between paganism and Catholicism and blending that together. I'm referring to like Aradia's father. And then when I'm thinking of the devil, I'm thinking of the horned or antlered wild god of like virility and ecstasy. And yeah. Do you have anything on that?
I mean, I don't know if I fit into any particular like soft polytheism, hard polytheism category. You know, I'm an animist at heart. And I kind of treat entities kind of as I meet them, and I take them. You know, some testing is often appropriate, but I take them at their word with some testing involved. I definitely agree that like Lucifer, Satan, and the devil have very different histories, and they got kind of wound up through sort of sedimentation and identification with each other in Christianity, but they may not all be the same being. Right. Or maybe sometimes the devil we know can wear, you know, he's the master shapeshifter. And we'll get into more of that later. So he can become, or maybe is, everything. So he gets to wear whatever face he wishes.
I think there's something to be said too about kind of the consuming aspect and conquering within this Abrahamic religion that kind of has just consumed other deities and spirits, and whether they have made old gods demons or what have you. Like, I think there also is very much like an egregore of the big bad that the Abrahamic religions have in a way kind of birthed, like have kind of created, in the same way that like, yeah, I've controversial, but I also feel like there is this very problematic white evangelical nationalist God that has like been made as this sort of egregore here very strongly, like in the States, that I think shares similarities with Yahweh, but I also think is almost so distinct as like white American Christian nationalism. Like there's an entity of that.
Yeah. It's almost like I borrow a little bit of Jungian terminology, like a shadow self or
Mhm.
an inversion of this Yahweh, this Adonai figure, and it's kind of, for me, I suspect that there's an aspect of the hedge at work. When humans created civilization, we hedged out the other, we hedged out the wild, and we built our civilization inside of a little boundary set that everything we cast out of our civilization kind of goes out into the other. And that's kind of what they've done. They've cast out all these qualities, and qualities are often associated with spiritual entities. They cast out these beings beyond the hedge, and they've kind of made them antithetical to what civilization is, and they turned everyone against it. And so in some ways, our witches devils is the enemy of civilization in that respect. I'm going to pick at that thread and pull on it. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it.
And I definitely think too that like this is such, I feel like, a common theme amongst trad witches, this inclusion of the devil in our craft. And, from coven to coven, how the red god or the devil sort of manifests. Of course, like in our previous streams, we've talked about how there's always going to be nuance from sort of coven to coven. But I do think that that's like a unique aspect that really sets the tradition of just traditional witchcraft in general, not even necessarily just American, but what kind of sets it apart from some other magical practices. I personally like that it kind of has teeth and that it's sharp and a little bit uncomfortable. Like, I've gotten questions before on my channel, like, well, is the witch's devil the Christian devil? Is the devil evil? And I mean, honestly, I think the more you try to put the devil in a box, like the less the devil really fits, because I feel like the devil is everything and nothing and multiple things all simultaneously while also being nothing. And the devil is exactly who the devil wants to be and can take the form and appear. Before we started, we were talking about some lore of like the seasons of the devil. And this is more of like a concept of like 4. So we kind of already talked about the Trinity with Satan, Lucifer, and the devil, who also very much play into seasonal lore really well. But the 4th devil being the devil in black, or the man in black at the crossroads, who, like, there's also other names for this particular form of the devil that I don't know I'm going to talk about per se on a live stream for various reasons. But like the devil in red, we see in the fall very much, I feel, as the beast, or as like this red, sexy, satanic, I mean, very stereotypical, like satanic figure. And then with the devil in gold being in the spring with like the renewal of light and prophecy, very golden man, very Apollo, very music, harmony, beauty, illumination, divination. And then the devil in green, where we have the returning of the green and the wild green and fucking and feasting and, all of those things with the antlered ones. So I think breaking the devil down in that way can be another way, I think, for witches to relate more. Because sometimes I think the devil will wear the skin of a god in the sense of like just trying to build relation with the witch, or to take the form of something recognizable and familiar,
Yeah. 100%. I definitely think that he is one of the most multifaceted beings. And it's funny, I often think that we get stuck in like trying to gender this being too much too. In fact, there's a weird little thing I do mentally to sort of trick myself out of pigeonholing him as like a masculine divine being specifically, is often I'll use the pronoun HYMN, him, as the way of talking about him instead of like HIM. So like speaking of him more as like he's a song, he's a harmony in the cosmos more than he is a male. Definitely not a human male in any way, but he's gender full. And often, you look back in like some early like medieval texts about the devil, he's androgynous. He
Yeah,
embodies
or even hermaphroditical. I've seen
exactly.
that a lot.
Exactly. He like crosses thresholds and boundaries and breaks them.
Yeah. Very much like a queer god. Absolutely.
100%. Yeah. In fact, in fairy, one of the names we use, this used to be a more sort of private secret name in the tradition, but it's been sort of out in the open for many, many years, decades now. But Jenna Glass, the blue god or the green god, because glass can mean either blue or green in Welsh. And it has sort of specific meanings with him in that way. But we see him as like very, very androgynous and very, very queer and able to sort of embody the fullness of queerness in the sense of not being able to be pigeonholed or pinned down or boxed in any way. Like anytime you try to capture the devil into one form, his best trick is to break out of that form and to trick you into seeing him in a different way, because he wants to destroy all the limitations that we have. That's his liberation, is destroying all these limitations we have in our mind and around our behaviors that keep us from being the fullest expression of ourselves.
Yeah, I just, it's juicy, it's delightful, it's delicious. I think, like I've had conversations with witches here, and I've had Astra and Natalie on my channel, and we were kind of talking about this, how like the devil has appeared to us all in like very different ways. Like there's, Astra was kind of talking about how like her relation with the devil is very much more so with like, the devil in black, the man at the crossroads kind of vibe. And Natalie was talking about how, the prophetic sort of golden Apollyon aspect of the devil very much like speaks to her. I feel closest with the devil intimately when I'm in the woods and that horned figure that might be somewhat bestial, like that's how when I am in communion with the devil, this is the Lord that I see and that I feel. Hooves and horns and antlers, and I mean it's sexy.
Yeah,
it's sexy. Not to sound like a furry, but a little bit. Yeah,
no, I definitely the figure that really calls out to me the most, I think, that the face that he wears the most for me, that I really am the most in love with, is the Fairy King. So this version of him that is I use it in the singular, but like I think it's important that we introduce this concept that I'm familiar with that's called the Magistelli or the Magistellus. So like I first read this word in Paul Hewson's Mastering Witchcraft, and he uses it very specifically in that to mean a tutelary spirit. But the way I've encountered it in other traditional witch houses, and especially in the fairy tradition, is that every spirit is more like a family of spirits. And at the local level, you're going to have a local appearance of the devil who isn't the devil, but is the devil. And he wears the mantle of this greater power, this greater being, and acts on behalf of and as him. So when we interact with him, we just consider him to be the devil, even though we realize that he's the local manifestation thereof. And so I think that's true of almost every spirit, that spirits are kind of like big chains of families of entities that are sort of interconnected and sort of are all caught up in doing the same work. You kind of see that similarly in like Santeria. You have like the road of an Orisha, which is like each person kind of gets their own version of the Orisha as their parent when they're crowned with it, but they're part of that road that's sort of a specific pathway to that spirit. I think that's really similar to how Magistellus works for us.
Yeah, I really like that sort of notion as well, like almost like an emissary or messenger of, for sure. When you work with the devil and when you are in communion with the devil in your rites or rituals or what have you, what are some sensations that you typically feel that give you the recognition that like you've made contact, that the devil is in your compass?
So the first sensation, it's like a combo of fear and horniness that kind of comes together.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Like I'm afraid
Ecstasy.
right now, and I don't know why I'm afraid, and
Yeah,
it's hot. Like
yeah,
that's the feeling associated. I definitely think that he carries that as like that's kind of what he is in a sense.
yeah. That's always what I have felt as well. Like when we have held Sabbaths where we're, working trans prophecy with the devil or communing with the devil or pacting or requesting for petitions from the devil. I always feel that the devil is in the compass when I am equally as ecstatically sort of aroused as I am, not necessarily fear, but fear in the sense that, like, almost like there's like a wild ferality, like a bear, I mean, I love a bear, honey. But something like that in the circle where this bear could theoretically maul you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily going to, but it could.
It's like this. It's like witnessing a tornado or a thunderstorm that's really intense too. Like
Yeah.
it's holy dread in a way. Like
Yeah.
this sense of like
Mm-hmm.
like yeah. No, I love him. He's one of the most powerful beings we know, and his whole interaction with us is about breaking us away from the things that we tie ourselves to that don't serve us. He is the liberator in the sense of like that really is weighing you down. Let's break it off of you. And he's not necessarily the gentlest of spirits either. Like I've had him definitely break things in my life to make them better.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing I think that traditional witches don't necessarily look to our gods to be comforted in the way that like mainstream religions necessarily do. We're
Right.
looking to interact with the depths and the breadth of creation. And that means that we allow ourselves to not necessarily be comforted and feel comfy all the time. We're okay. In fact, we seek out these peak experiences, these intense experiences with these beings that aren't in any way human, so that we can know ourselves and the gods better.
Yeah, I feel a lot of those sentiments as well when, like, I am in the space of the Black Goddess. Like, to me, she feels very, like, there's very much that eldritch aspect and almost like a fear that I feel with her. Not as much arousal with her. I feel with the devil, like, oftentimes when I am, performing works in league with the devil, it's sometimes to petition the devil for like spirit packs. I think that the devil is really good to do business with.
Mm-hmm.
And like assigning you other spirits to sort of help you, like kind of almost like the devil is like a middleman. I enjoy working with the devil also as kind of like a road opener, like spirit. So kind of aiding the compass and acts of like flight or traveling. There's also just like the ecstasy of the spirit, like not always necessarily having like a specific spell work agenda, but more so just communing and feasting and with the devil, like having I'm trying to think how I want to phrase this. I think you know where I'm going with it, but like having astral encounters of a physical, intimate, penetrative level is a big part, I think, of my own work with the Red God and consorting with him in that way.
That's awesome.
What about you? What is your, like, when you are bringing the devil into the compass round, is there like specific things that you tend to focus more on or work more with than you would necessarily some of the other witch gods?
Yeah, so we often conjure him specifically in the springtime to sort of quicken the year as part of like our seasonal rite, especially around like Candlemas, Easter time, because he carries that fire that he has, that witch fire that he brings to us. we want that to sort of help quicken the year and enliven the land. That's one of the main ways that we conjure him in. But like you said, the giving of familiar spirits, I definitely associate him with that, like almost like he's an animal tender. And he's like handing out this. He's got like a vessel of all these spirits that he's like, this one matches to you, this one matches to you. Yeah, he's an odd character, because when we often work with the spirits through possession work, and so when he possesses people, he is a strange being. He's very silly sometimes with us, and does odd, kooky things that we don't necessarily understand in the moment, but later on we're like, oh, that's what that was. Holy crap.
Oh, yeah.
But like very much is just an odd character when he's wearing our bodies.
Yeah, when we've done trans prophecy with our devil, it's very different, I feel like, from like our other two witch gods that we work with, in the sense that like the weaver, the black goddess, there's like a layer of severity with her. And I don't think that she feels as like jokey hokey, we're playing around. Like she feels very grandmotherly to me and very wise and like almost unfathomable. And when I'm interacting with our white goddess, like she feels very fairy-like to me. She feels a little bit trickstery to me. But the red god or the devil, definitely like a layer of like trickster kind of vibes, also kind of flirty vibes, also kind of like riddly vibes. And then one of the rites that we have every year at a particular Sabbath is we will summon the devil for a working familiar for that year. So like we'll draw on a new familiar, which we have multiple personal familiars that we just have in our own individual practices. But this specifically is like a familiar spirit we are asking the devil to assign each of us in the coven. That is like kind of like our business partner in magic for the next witch's year. Like examples of this is like it's part of how I wrote my first book, was actually working with a particular spirit, because I felt that she had very much put to me that part of the work was writing this book. And I had no intention or ever thought that I would ever write a book. Like I'm not really the type. It wasn't even my intention. And it kind of just started off where she was like, you're going to write this. And I'm like, babe, me? I have a 10th grade education. Like, I'm not really a writer. You know what I mean? I do hair. Like, I eat hot chip and be bisexual. Like, you know? But like, that's an example of a spirit coming with a particular goal to help sort of raise the witch in empowerment and magic for that coming year. That's another way that we work with him. And then there's also times where, I mean, I think that there's also something to be said about just basic like reverence. Like I'm not always necessarily going to the devil to request something. Sometimes it's just have a root beer. you know?
I have a lot of
have some bread.
Yeah. I have a lot of shrines in our temple room. So like he has his over here on the side of the room in the east. And you know, there's always stuff being fed to him over there. But yeah, I definitely think that the reverence is part of keeping the lines of communication with them open. Like, you know, I don't necessarily think that we worship our gods in the same way that other people who work with spirits worship them. I think of the word worship in the way that we worship the body of a lover. You know, that is the kind of reverence I have with my gods. I keep nothing back from them. I open myself up to them fully and share every part of myself. And then they share themselves back with me. And there's this intercourse between us that is both mythical and carnal, because there's this aspect of like, you know, when I fly, I'm having intercourse with spirits all the time. I sometimes joke that I'm spectrosexual, that I'm most attracted to spirits. But you know, all that joking aside, like they're there and they are so real, and the world in which we interact with them is more real than this one, at least the way I encounter it.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes you. Interacting with them fundamentally changes you at like an essence level. In fact, I think that's one of the things he likes to do is he likes to transform us. I often see that when we're celebrating the Wheel of the Year, we're walking in his footprints and his hoofprints. We're following his path. It's like a winding spiral path that is towards the initiation of ourselves over and over and over again as we become our true selves. And so that's what he's doing. He's like leading us into our wholeness.
Do you have any favorite like pop culture depictions?
I really like the depiction of him in The Sandman, like the devil in the sand as Lucifer. I really am very into that comic book version of him because it's nuanced. Let's see what else.
It's been so long since I've seen that. I can't think of it. I need to look at that after.
It's very sexy and very androgynous. Lucifer Morningstar is very, very hot in that.
I know the TV show Lucifer. Like, I know that Lucifer.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother, who's in her 90s, watches it and has the hots for him. She'll tell me about how Lucifer was in her dreams.
Ooh,
I'm like, oh, was she? Was she? Okay.
When I was, about 10 years ago, there was a show called Salem that was out for a while. Yeah. And the first season of Salem was really great. And I liked
all of Salem.
It got a little campy for me in the end as they leaned into that like, the devil's kind of thing. But yeah.
Okay. Abby, the witch on here, so reminds me of the redhead. I forget her name. She's like, I think the preacher's daughter. She has like the red hair, like John Hale's daughter. You know?
Yeah. The magistrate's daughter.
Tell me that they're not the same person. Like I feel like Abby, and then Mary, like the brunette. I think her name was Mary.
Yeah.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous.
She was badass. I loved
Big girl crush on her. Yeah. Yes, Anne Hale is who Abby reminds me of. I love, of course, Black Phillip as the goat, but also Black Phillip as that feathered hat. That guy. If y'all don't know what I'm talking about, honey. I also really enjoy like the Beast as depicted in the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, I love that, like, almost Baphomet-esque type vibe. That, like, musky, hairy, horned, hooved. This might be a little bit of a stretch, but queer icon, Hem from the Powerpuff Girls.
Yes.
That, I would say, was probably one of, like, if I were to think back on really recognizing the archetype, if you will, of, like, the devil as a child, that was probably one of, like, my earlier recognitions of like, oh, this is devilish. Oh, I like this. Oh, this makes me feel something, Yeah.
No, yeah. He is, he's been around a long time. Like you mentioned earlier on how some other witchcrafts that aren't okay with him are sort of very, they want to put him at sort of arm's reach. They don't want to sort of have his name associated with witchery. But you look in the trial records and he's all over the place. And part of that's the imagination of the Inquisitors. And part of that is the actual folk practices that may have been sort of covertly been recorded through those confessions, like Isabel Galbi, for instance.
Well, I think all over those trial records, too, is also like the very clear repressed sexuality of some of those inquisitors that were almost living vicariously through the devil in a way. Yeah. Like, I can see them over there writing this erotica almost sometimes, like this really cruel, messed up, twisted, strange torture porn,
It's interesting. In some ways, they were invoking his presence as the adversary by their torture of people, of their torture of women, the oppressed. That was almost an invocation of this opposing force. They created an ordeal between the accused and the accuser, and he was kind of there in that moment because he's there at every threshold. I think the most, he's an initiator. So the most important aspect of him is he's always giving us these new experiences that change us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I think back to like the way he's talked about in some covens of traditional witchcraft is like Cain or Tubal Cain.
Mm-hmm.
There's a connection there between, you know, the folk devil and Tubal Cain's presence as a spirit that maybe isn't explicit, but I think it's sort of an undercurrent there. And
For sure.
that shaping
That
fire of
forging, like Cain's forge. Oh yeah. I think in American traditional witchcraft, you know, there is a big current of like weaving, but there's equally as big of a current as like the sacred forge.
Yeah.
I really like the sort of visual of like a loom and an anvil and like these two axis points of witchery.
Yeah.
I think that feels very like trad witch. It feels very like ATW to me.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
I think too, like in a lot of the trials, you know, these folks would talk about how women specifically like have this unique sort of draw, like are more frail and like susceptible to the devil's ways. And I think some of that really speaks to like the opinions and attitudes around human sexuality of the time, because like, you know, it wasn't that women had really possession of our own sexuality. It was like being inflicted upon women by something horrible and evil. Because women can't enjoy sex. That's crazy, you know? Obviously, that alone is supernatural, women's sexuality. So I think also like the ecstasy of spirit of it all is like such an interwoven aspect of the devil that I just like if I was having conversations with other witches, that would probably be a key point. And are we working with the same God really? You know, and I think there's something to be said about how even like other sort of adjacent to traditional witchcraft, you know, will only refer to the devil as like the horned one or the old one, but they will never call them the devil, you know? And I feel like our sort of religious culture went through this really domesticating era in like the late 90s to mid 2000s where, oh, no, we're good witches. No, we don't even believe in a devil. Like, and I'm feeling like we're really having a resurgence now of like the opposite. But I still get, and I'm sure you do too, like I still get comments or feedback from people who are sitting there arguing with me about how there's no devil in the craft on a video I've just made about the devil in the craft. Like, what? Okay, maybe not in yours, which I feel like if you look around enough, you'll probably find them. However, maybe not in yours, but he was just at my house.
Right.
What do you mean?
Right. And, you know, and devil's really a word that he may not even have chosen for himself, except for, you know, there's also like this sense of gleeful, it's like how I use the F word for myself. I get word like it's a reclamation, like in the sense of like we call ourselves witches, but like historically nobody would have called themselves that when they're doing what we're doing. They would have had other words, but we've reclaimed this word for a very specific reason. And you know, there's also the etymology of like devil. Ultimately, probably comes from some words that mean like deva, like spirit itself.
Yeah.
And one of the titles we used
for land spirit, like specifically too.
Yeah, one of the titles we used for him is the master of all spirits, or the master of magic. Not that he's like over them, but that like he has become all of them.
Well, there's so much lore and like us as witches also receiving power from the devil through very connected acts. I mean, I personally really like the lore of the Osculum and Feme. You know what I mean? I mean, who doesn't? Right? Like, I think that the lore of that also, I think, points again to like, you know, the heresy of the perversion of women's sexuality. And just cunnilingus and acts of that nature in general. being associated with like a very devilish act, because it's not necessarily like life-giving. But it's interesting to think about the osculum and feme as a way to appease the devil in order to receive power. And I feel like, this lore was, I think, really meant to be kind of more dehumanizing and degrading, but I think it's like really empowering and nasty, like in a good way, like be a nasty person, nasty woman, nasty whatever, like a nasty girl.
It's about control in a way, like all those anxieties that were projected onto women during like the early modern period when there were a lot of witch trials happening. Those were all the fears of the people who had all the power, worried that they couldn't control those bodies, that those bodies were too easy to get out of control. So they had to double down on their manipulations around them, because if you want to control people, you control the people who make people. And so the anxieties about women's sexuality is like right at the heart of all the accusations that were leveled of us at us as witches. That sexuality that can't be tamed, that is super threatening to the structures of power, because you can no longer define, you can no longer close the boundaries of what a woman is or what a man is. If you open it up, then you no longer have as much control over it.
I would be interested, like I can't think off the top of my head, but I would be interested to see, like in any trial lore, if we have records of this same sort of phenomenon with men.
I mean, there's definitely, the osculum and fame was given to the devil by anybody of any gender. So like you have people essentially giving analingus to the man in black as an ecstatic sexual rite. At least that's what I imagined it probably was.
I was just thinking, like wondering if there was like specific, examples. Like we have like specific examples, like Isabel Gowdy, for example, talks about her experience with the rough and wild and rugged and feral clap, 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 clapping of it all.
Whose cum was as cold as well water.
Right. And like, I wonder if we have more homoerotic aspects anywhere in some trial records. That's something that like I can't think of as a specific example. Like,
in Witchcraft and the Gay Counterculture, Arthur Evans does give some examples from some Swedish witch trial records that talk about like some folks who were caught out worshiping a giant phallus in a field, and they were all having a circle
jerk, if you will.
Yeah, and there was like same-sex intercourse happening at that rite, and it was like the grandest of perversions, as it was described at the time. Like, oh my God, they'll do anything, those witches. Yeah. But at the same time, like, the devil being the liberator, being the one who guides us in a way to the Sabbath, the eternal Sabbath that's always happening at the center of creation, the center of time and space. In that place, like, we're always being transformed, and we're having sexual and I've experienced being eaten by other beings at the Sabbath that was sexual and almost like a mutilation experience all combined into one. And it's a place where everything is combined and reformatted and then breathed back out in different ways. Again, it is that what are the words on Baphomet? It is divide and unite. What's the Latin? It's whatever the Latin is, but dividing and uniting over and over and over again, which is, intercourse. It's dividing and uniting.
Yeah. And like I see in the chat, we're kind of having some conversations about trials. Like Giles Corey was the one who was like stoned to death in Salem. Was that Giles Corey? Yeah. Or pressed? Yeah. I didn't know that there was any lore with him necessarily engaging in ecstatic rites with the devil.
Oh.
And about Thomas Harvey, I'm not familiar with that one. I think I was reading, there's a book called like 13 Witchcraft in 13 Trials. It's a book that I was sent from a publisher. It's a really great book, I think, to read around like Holomus and like looking at our ancestors, our mighty and beloved dead, because the book details 13 different witch sort of trials globally. And one of them that I found really interesting, I believe it was in Iceland. It was also almost exclusively men that were persecuted, and they were literate. They were writing letters. Oh my God. They were writing letters. And yeah, they were primarily the persecuted in that. But I don't remember in that trial story that there was ever any men talking about feasting with the devil per se.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was just the fact that they were literate was associated as a form of sorcery.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean that goes all the way back to like Thoth and Hermes and all that kind of magic, which, you know, I've also encountered witchcraft traditions that use specifically those two beings, like the thrice great Hermes as a face of the witch's devil, as the master of magic, and a face of you know, Thoth as a version of, as a face of the devil, which is interesting to me because it's not associations that I necessarily have, but like in a way, like when we can make these associations, we've made the link, and then if we can make it work for us, if we can get the result from making the link, then it works. That's all the proof we need.
yeah, I've seen like a lot of neo-pagans also kind of like lump Loki, or sometimes Set in with this same type of current as well. Like Set also is like really big within like vampiric spaces as well. But I kind of am infatuated with like just taking the devil as the devil. I think it can be a little bit like limiting when we're like, you know, just trying to pick and limit to like one aspect. And instead, I think just allowing the devil in your life to be as they are, whatever that might look like, I think is way more fruitful than trying to like specifically connect with a specific aspect. You know what I mean? Like see how the devil appears to you and kind of go from there.
Yeah.
And don't really have like set expectations of the devil is going to arrive in this clothing specifically, because the devil might come in no clothing, you know?
Hopefully.
Do you have any personal experiences that you feel comfortable like sharing of like maybe your first interaction with the devil? Or
one of my earliest interactions that I can remember is, so I grew up very rurally, about 70 miles from where I live here now. And I grew up in a small town of about 1,000 people, and we lived up on a hill in the town that sort of the hill dead ended, the street dead ended into a bunch of woods that went on for acres and acres. And so I spent my childhood mostly playing in the woods by myself, or with my cousins sometimes. And I must have been around 8 or 9. I remember being in the woods. There was a spot that if you went up, you could look down over the hills, down to the river, the Muskingum River, where the dam was. And I remember standing there, and then like these winds came and the storm came. I'm like, oh no, I need to go home. It's going to storm. But as I like turned, there was this big shadow that was very, very tall, like 10, 12 feet high. And it was standing like right next to this tree. And it looked very touchable, like it was a solid shadow, but it wasn't a material that my eyes recognized. And I like didn't know what to do. Like I'm this kid in the woods by myself. And then I just hear this weird snake hissing sound like come out of it, like it was steam, releasing steam. And then it just kind of like faded away. That was my very first experience of the devil.
did you recognize that as the devil at the time, or were you kind
of
of
at the time it was very bewildering. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And then later on, when I met him again, I was like, oh, you're that thing. You're that shadow, that very tall shadow. It's very thin and tall.
Yeah, that's one of my early experiences I remember was like in a dreamlike state, which now I kind of look back and see it more as a flight than necessarily just a dream. But at the time, I really wasn't sure what to make of it. Because I wasn't even really in trad craft spaces or really practicing like trad witchery. I was kind of just figuring out my practice and just kind of dabbling very eclectically and not really any specific direction. I just knew that I was a witch and that I was drawn to magic, and that was all there was to it. And Wicca was so much more accessible, but it just never really 100% felt like home for me, for numerous reasons, but one of them being, I feel like, the rejection of the blasphemous. Like, I want that in my practice, and that was part of what kind of drove me away from Wicca. But I remember having this sort of vision-like dream, we'll say, and it was here at my house that I'm still in now. And my driveway, there's a hedge that lines my driveway, taller. I'm 6 foot and stacked. This hedge is taller than me. It grows really, really tall. And there's actually elderberries that grow within it, but it's a yew hedge. So it's elderberry and yew.
Mm-hmm.
Gorgeous. Love it. Also great privacy from my neighbors, right? But in my dreamlike state, I was in my driveway, but I was not in my driveway, if you're following what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And like the hedge kind of separated, and this large bestial / skeletal, like antlered, wild sort of deer, stag, skeletal head in like a black cloak. So I couldn't really make out much of their form because they were kind of formless and shadowy, like what you were referring to. But there was distinctly like antlers and a large stag skeleton like head. And then the rest of it was kind of cloaked. Basically like came for me. Like I felt like I was being picked up or collected.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of scary. Like, and at the time it was kind of nightmarish, you know, like I woke up with that sort of panic in your chest after you've had a nightmare of being chased or followed or something. It very much gave me that feeling. I didn't really have at that point any sense of like arousal with it. It was just more like kind of like that. And then shortly after that, I'm getting more and more into trad craft at this point. And I actually wrote this down, also included it in the book. I think you've probably read it. But I had this dream where it was a flight, but at the time, I'm thinking that this is just a dream, you know? And in that, I'm basically watching myself in third person, like completely outside of my body, watching me, who is me, but she's not me, but she's like me in a different timeline me.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I go into this woods, and there's like a clearing, and there's like a mushroom circle, and like I'm entering the circle, and I'm like spilling blood in the mushroom circle. And then this same sort of entity that I encountered in my driveway, okay, manifests more fleshy. And the bottom half is kind of formless and almost like how I perceived it was almost djinn-like, like elemental, modded kind of looking, where it was just like stormy black mass, shadowy. And then like a very bestial, masculine sort of like torso, but also kind of breasted, but not. And then like the head of almost like a satyr. And I carved the number 14 into my hand, and we do things together. And that was the experience. And at the time I was like trying to figure out what this was or who this entity was. And like nothing was really matching. And then, so I wrote that originally in a Google document, because I use Google Doc on my phone as basically like my dream journal.
Nice.
Because I have it right there. I don't have to find a pen or a notebook. Like I can talk to text while I'm using the bathroom half asleep, you know, and talk my dream into my phone. And at 14 months to that dream, I had a severe car accident where I partially like went through my windshield, almost died. I had a brain bleed that just disappeared overnight.
Wow.
It kept me overnight because I had an acute brain bleed, and you know that can get really bad really quickly. Brain bleeds can. Other than that, I had some bits of broken glass in my scalp, but no real broken bones or anything crazy. I did total the car. But I really do believe that that was, in some very discombobulated way, like alternate reality, dimensional me, and the devil saving me in this reality. Like very, yeah, it's hard to explain.
I have so many of those experiences that those are the things we're looking for, right? These things that are non-normative experiences that shape us profoundly. Like that's where the witchcraft is living. It's hot. It's super hot.
It is.
You know, in some ways you can kind of see that he is that threshold of like sex and death. Because that's where you were. You were at the threshold of like you experience this like sexy creature and then you have this death experience.
Literally.
Yeah. So he brought you to that threshold and then it pushed you into your witchness more fully. Like,
yeah, I
amazing.
really feel that.
Yeah.
Like almost initiatory in a way, because like after that is when I feel like my trad witchery really started to develop more, and I began to walk that particular road more after that sort of experience, because there was just no denying the devil at that point for me. You know, not that I really ever did. It was more just not even a focus, because so much of my path was so almost cripplingly Dianic, where everything was high femme, you know, which I still have that as a thing in my practice. Like I'm definitely a lot more white goddess coded than I am red god coded, even still. But that's also because I have almost more of like I feel more of like a familial relation with her than I do like a consorting relation. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
One interesting experience that I've had, that I have had multiple times, is that my fetchmate, my chief familiar spirit, has been possessed by the devil, and that's the way the devil typically communicates to me, is by I use this sort of, it's not his name, but it's a name I use publicly for him. I call him Corey, my fetchmate. So Corey has been possessed by a face of the devil many times, and that's how that face particularly talks and communicates instructions to me and lore. Have you ever experienced an experience where a spirit that you know has been possessed by another spirit, particularly maybe the devil?
No, I have not had that, but I will say, and I'm not going to go into explicit detail about this on live, because I am a lady, but I have had that in the flesh. Like I have had interactions with a particular partner that I don't even know if it was necessarily like a conscious thing that they were actually doing, but I've had experiences where I'm having adult interactions with a partner and I'm also having an almost ecstatic like visual experience partially in the other world with the horned one at the same time. And I'm feeling the devil through my partner in the flesh.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite sex magic techniques, is like getting possessed by a god or a spirit, and then you can have carnal relations with that spirit. They have a meat body that you can interact with.
Well, and my experience with it, like I didn't even set out to do that. Like that wasn't even really on my radar at the time. It just kind of developed into that.
Yeah.
And it really sets the whole experience super apart. And that particular partner, like we don't do-si-do anymore, but it's still in my memory. Like, you know?
I mean, that's an initiatory experience as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Have you had it with a working partner in that way where you have set out intentionally to make that happen?
Yeah.
How have you gone about doing that?
Usually we like make a circle or
asking
compass.
For a friend,
And we have very good technology for possession work in the fairy tradition, because we've been working on it for a long time, and so we're really good at like bringing spirits down on people. And so like when my ex and I conceived my son, actually, we were possessed by particular spirits that we brought down on each other, and then conceived him to bring forth another particular spirit through him. So, you know, I've been involved in all kinds of weird sex magic stuff before. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I don't typically engage in those sorts of rites with other witches. So in this particular instance, like this person is not even a practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not like something that I like set out to intend to experience, but I did share it with him afterwards, you know, because we had gone to the dance hall together before. And this particular instance, like the whole vibe and everything was different. And it was really good. And like we're still kind of on talking terms and stuff, but both of us still remember and refer to that particular instance with like this ingrained memory of just how different, not different better, but different otherworldly the experience was. And I remember him asking me about like, you know, kind of like what got into you kind of thing. And it's like, well, it's funny that you say that because I was wondering what got into you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because I felt like me.
Yeah.
But he didn't feel like him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he is not that he's like not open to all of the ways of the witchery.
Yeah.
But like he himself is not a practitioner. So it was kind of more interesting because I know he didn't intend for that to happen either.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
These are going to be the stories. These are going to be the stories that we're going to haunt the CNAs with when we're in a nursing home one day.
Oh my goodness. I hope I never end up in a nursing home.
No, me too. But if we do, we got to at least raise a little bit of hell and make people uncomfortable with our weird witching ways.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's fully what I plan to do.
Those places are very straight and very Christian, and we would scare the crap out of them.
Maybe we get in trouble.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. The Wild God. The Wild God. That's a name that I learned when I was studying the Wildwood tradition for this entity, the Wild God. That's what they call him, or the horned cloaked one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, some other names I keep running into that are like in our little notes, like the Prince of the World, the Lord of the Hosts of the Air, the Sovereign of Storms. That makes me think back to that little constellation of like the Bucka or Puck or Puka.
Yes.
Because those entities are always associated with like the sea and storms. Yeah. He's everywhere. You know, I also have that, you know, that piece that I put in our notes about that story that we have in our coven about the witch's devil and sort of what he did at the beginning of his fall and like how he became what he was. Do you want me to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So in our coven, we have this story that the Master of Magic led the Grigori, the fallen, to fall. And it's not the same fall that you might necessarily have in Christian myth. We've sort of, you know, our story's a little different. But after he fell, he passed through all of the spirit courts through reincarnation by taking on, like, first he fell from white into redness. So he took on a flesh body. And then that red body died. And so he went into the blackness. And then in that blackness, that dead body was transformed into something that's more like a fairy being. And then he went into the glass of the green. And then that became changed yet again through the next incarnation into the whiteness, into the angelic original form that he was having. So he passes through each of the courts, we say 7 times. So that is an interesting set of numbers. If you multiply 4 times 7, you get 28. And 28,
I'm glad you could do that math.
28 is the number of the menstrual cycle or the moon.
Mm.
So like there's that sort of built into that as well. Yeah.
Very cool.
But like that story is about his strength, and his strength isn't might or force, it's transformation.
Right.
Like, to truly be strong, you have to let go of what no longer serves you so you can become something new. Like he's always this transforming, becoming, this
Initiating.
Initiating, exactly.
Bougie wants to know, what reading material can one gather to learn more on the fairy tradition? I think we had this question before, but do you have any books that you would recommend?
The primary source materials are going to be Victor and Cora for me. So like Victor's 2 books of poetry, Thorns of the Blood Rose, which was published decades ago, and then his follow-up, Lilith's Garden. So those are poetry books, and the poetry has a lot of our lore encoded inside of it. And then 50 Years in the Fairy Tradition by Cora Anderson. It was sort of her gift to Victor for their 50th wedding anniversary. And it's a great little text. Every time I read it, I find something new in it. I'm like, oh. And then Victor also wrote a book called Etheric Anatomy. That's really good. And then if you're going to go with people who aren't the Andersons, I might take a look at Thorn Coyle wrote a book, Evolutionary Witchcraft, which is okay. It doesn't really follow the lore as I understand it very well. Thorn Coyle kind of went off on their own and did their own thing, I think. But those are the main books that I would recommend.
What books would you recommend someone who's interested in getting to know the devil more from even just like a general sort of trad witchery view?
There, what's that author, Roger
J. Horn?
Yeah, Roger Horn has some really good books on the witch's devil. I think, in fact, that's the name of the book, The Witch's Devil.
Yeah. In his book, he very much kind of like covers different names and forms throughout a lot of various like pagan culture, but also some Christian as well. Like in that particular book, he brings up Dionysus, Apollo, Lucifer.
I definitely think of Dionysus as a devilish, as a devil figure. Like that is a very important mask personally to me. I actually have a taboo that I keep with Dionysus. I don't eat beef because of my relationship with him.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm not allowed to eat the flesh of the bovine. I can drink its milk and I can have bone broth, but I can't eat its flesh.
Okay. Yeah, I really like that book a lot as well. I think Gemma Gary's The Devil's Dozen is really, really good. I'd recommend that one. Really just pretty much everything by Gemma Gary. But
everything Gemma does is golden, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And her publishing house, like everything that they put out, like Corinne Byer has some books. There's some other authors from them. Excellent work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you think of some other books?
Let's see. Her other book that's just the general traditional witchcraft, or Cornish Book of Ways. There's quite a good section in there about the Bucca, which is their way, their entity, their spirit that they interact with as their sort of devilish being. And
Keldon's Crooked Path.
Keldon's books are really good. We were just talking about Keldon before we started.
Yeah. George Hare's The Ineffable Name.
I've not read that one, but I
really
adore George, and I adore George's work. So
yeah, I adore George as well. I feel like actually George Hare's work, The Ineffable Name, and Keldon's book, The Crooked Path, those two books specifically are the books that I typically recommend folks who are interested in learning more about trad witchery in general. But I kind of recommend them based on who I'm referring them to, because I feel like The Crooked Path reads kind of more neutral feeling versus George's reads a little bit. There's a little bit, and I don't say this in a critical or a bad way at all, but it's a little bit, it feels more subversive and like a little bit more heretical and almost a little bit more Luciferian coded. So like the girlies who really like a little bit of dark fluff, I'm like, oh, you should check out The Ineffable Name. The girlies who are like still kind of afraid of the devil or are still kind of like, wow, there's no devil in the craft. Maybe I'm going to recommend more The Crooked Path too, because some people can just get so frightened and turned off because of the devil that like they almost go away from trad witchery, which is fine. You don't have to be here. It doesn't have to be the path for you. I think The Devil is great as a gatekeeper in that regard, you know. But I
Well,
like
that makes me. What do you think about the idea of gatekeeping in general, like that term and how that applies to what we do? What do you think about that?
Well, we do, don't we?
Yes,
We
and for
do.
good reason.
That's part of our job, isn't it, to keep the gate
Mm-hmm.
as clergy of the craft.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's literally part of our responsibility. You know, I think gatekeeping is very much becoming like this sort of buzzword that is just associated with exclusion, discrimination, and elitism. And I think sometimes that is the case.
Mm-hmm.
I think I see that more so from magicians than I do witches personally. Like, I see magicians, you know, putting out books in a very limited quantity for absorbent prices. You know, they're not doing that because they have to. They're doing that because they want to, usually. And because that sort of financial gatekeeping from the work also limits who has access to the material.
Mm-hmm.
And by limiting how many copies are out there, it kind of creates a little bit of hysteria and like triggers some of the collectors. So I feel like see gatekeeping in the same way from witches as I do with magicians. I mean, are there witches spaces that I believe are discriminating against, you know, the inclusion of LGBT people or men, or women? Like, yeah, I've definitely seen that. But I don't think that it's as common as the true sense of gatekeeping in the word, that we are an initiatory tradition. So gatekeeping is kind of going to be part of that.
Yeah.
But sometimes the gate, I was talking recently with a mentee of mine within the RTA. I have a couple of first year students right now that I'm working with in that. And, you know, it's really cool and amazing, all this work that Natalie and Lorelai did together and all this work that is published, because I don't know of any other tradition that has these degreed teachings put out in this sort of format, accessible to the Commonwealth. Like, anyone can go buy the book. You know what I mean? A lot of this material would be initiatory and sort of gate kept. You would have to be in a coven and having weekly or monthly sort of teachings from a high priest or priestess to get some of this information. And now it's available in a book like this. Like, that's kind of wild, really, because it just, that wasn't the way of the weird before, if you will.
Yeah.
But there is still a level of gatekeeping. And even with talking with Lorelai, like, you know, the names of the gods and initiations of first, second, and third degree are, you know, clearly detailed. You can go pick up a book and see what's going on, but you can read those words and still not know. Like, there's gatekeeping in the terms of experience, because there are some ritual and magical experiences that cannot be put in the human tongue and that you can only experience through the rites of a static ritual with other witches also, because there's something to be said about that, practicing on your own versus practicing in a group. You know, you can't really sell that or put that in a book. It has to be experienced. And then there's also gatekeeping in the sense of actually doing the work a lot of times. You know, second degree and third degree may be more gate kept in a sense, but first degrees can look at the third degree initiation in the book. They can skip ahead. There's nothing stopping them. But even upon reading that, it still doesn't really actually give the experience because you're not there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's a common thing too, is like a lot of this information isn't even necessarily being gate kept anymore. Like, you just have to work it. And if you're not doing the work, then that's the gate right there, you know? Or another aspect of gatekeeping, like our coven, we have 4 open Sabbats a year. We have seasonal Esbats that we invite some of our outer court to. And then we have 4 closed Sabbats, but part of our coven's sort of goal or like mission, of course, is to turn the wheel, to be shepherds of the seasons, and to serve our community. And by our, I mean here locally, to see a need, fill a need, the local community. So we have 4 open Sabbats a year. And these Sabbats are never like widely advertised on Facebook. They're not on a meetup app. Like, they're not They're not advertised. The people find these Sabbats by being invited by another initiate. So everyone who is within the inner court of the coven can give people invitations. And then people who are in the outer court can bring 1 + 1. And then if you're not in the outer court, then if you're invited, you cannot bring a +1. Our events are 21 and over as well. And unless you're given permission, no, you cannot bring your best friend or your partner or whatever, because we take it pretty seriously, the gatekeeping of protecting the privacy and the sanctity of the space. It's a big respect thing. It's also a big safety thing as well. So I'm very pro gatekeeping. Gates keep predators out.
Yes. Amen. Nema. Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm also a big fan of gatekeeping done responsibly. I think there's, I think it's what you're gatekeeping, who and what. It's context and intention. Like if you are protecting the integrity and the boundaries of your tradition, that's one thing. If you're deciding that some people, there was a big thing that happened at one of the last PantheaCons that I went to where, trans women weren't welcome into a women's space. And they were kept out. And I think that's bad gatekeeping. Like you're deciding for other people their identities.
I don't know. I have a controversial opinion about that. As a trans woman.
Yeah.
Let us not forget. I think that there is something to be said about groups like that in a couple different ways. One, there are plenty of like men's groups that no one gives a shit about. Honestly, I mean, the people that are in them do. I'm not saying that like they're meaningless, but I don't see like the outrage in the same way when there's dude bro circle jerk club and people crying about not being included. One, there's nothing stopping anyone from starting their own group. A lot of times these small groups are also, sometimes in the privacy of individual members' homes. I have every right to decide who's welcome in my house. This is not a government funded building. I'm not getting tax breaks. This is my private residence, So also, I think it's a good thing for those groups to be really loud and direct about not being welcoming, because I think that actually keeps everyone way safer than like a trans woman stumbling into one because they were under the impression that it was a women's group for women by women and not that it was necessarily like assigned female at birth type vibe, So I'm not necessarily of the opinion that groups having specifics around who they welcome in the space. I'm not necessarily of the opinion that that should necessarily be policed, because I do think that covens should have autonomy. And I do think that men and women and trans people of whatever combination should be able to have their own spaces. And like, I would never demand to be included in the Minoan Brotherhood just based off of my physical anatomy. Like, I wouldn't want to be in that space, And then also in some of these like female, which I kind of hate that word, but let's just say, okay, what are they doing? Is there maybe a reason why there's a part of anatomy that's important for what they're doing in that work? Are they really just being turfy? Sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes I think they are just being turfs. I don't know anything about this particular situation, but recently, I think I shared this privately with you. I had someone reach out about their women's group. And, they're having issues with being labeled as transphobic because they're exactly what you just referenced. And they were basically asking me, a trans woman, by the way, how they can word this to where it basically still means the same thing, but it sounds more politically correct. Or if they should just take it down. And my thought process was, no, I think you should be extremely direct and public about that. And I think it is what it is. And people are going to take issue with that. Yeah. I believe you have the right to express that. I'm not going to say you can't do that. but also people are going to take issue with it too.
Yeah. I mean, it really is about context and intention for me. Like, I totally understand what you're saying, but like, I think when I look at specific examples, like what happened at PantheaCon, there was a lot of double talk. Like, oh, it's for menstruating people, but then of course there were women who no longer menstruated who were there, and it's for
or trans men.
Yeah, there were transmasculine people in the room that were allowed, but not, trans feminine people. So like,
yeah, this particular group put out a thing basically that their group is for female women.
That's a weird
like
word.
Yeah, like people assigned female at birth whose gender identity is woman, I guess. Which also means that trans men are not welcome in their group either. No one really talks about that though. We all just kind of focus on like the big titty goth tranny. You know what I mean? Like, and I've never really felt necessarily like discriminated, excluded from, but I've also been the kind of person that like, okay, if I'm not welcome at your table, fuck your table then, and I'm going to go have my own table.
Right.
And then I did. And that's what I've done here locally. And there are older priestesses who, back in the day kind of snuffed their nose at me because I'm a loudmouth, brash, silicone and saline, TRANNY over here, tatted up and whatever. And, they didn't want to entertain me in their space. So then I started my own space of weird queer rejects. And now they're trying to collab from coven to coven.
Right.
I don't think so. Sorry.
Right. Exactly. I mean, when I hear older initiates of my tradition talk, like people who were initiated back in the 60s and 70s, that was very much the vibe. It's like fairy people were, my oath mother describes being up on the hill with some of her coven, looking down at this pagan festival in like the mid 70s. And they were definitely seen as like the weirdo freaks who were just strange witches, where everybody else who was like heterosexual and normal was down in the festival.
Right.
I'm like, yeah.
Because only hetero people can enjoy and engage in fertility magic.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also really enjoy more so the label of, like, I understand the fertility cults and I get that, but I also really prefer more the mystery cult vibe. And I, to take it to like, even like the cults of Isis level, like I think covens are still very much following in this where, on either side of the Nile, you sort of have like this cultural divide between life and death, like the priests that were healing and midwifing and making, healing tonics and blessing and consecrating farmland. And then on the other side, you have the clergy that is, leading mummification and kind of working as psychopomps. I think that we have that even today within modern craft as well. I mean, there's plenty of fertility groups that we can look at, some pretty big traditions and names and players. But again, tying this into gatekeeping, I think that's part of the nature of being a mystery cult, is that it's gate kept.
Mm-hmm. That's how you keep the mysteries intact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They have to be experienced firsthand without like getting crib notes beforehand. So, no spoilers. Spoilers ruin the mystery.
Yeah, I don't know, like I said, about the particular PantheaCon, but I know that there's, that group in my area and, they're really struggling with their membership. And I wonder why. Mm-hmm. You're entitled and I think should be allowed to run your group however you best see fit. Mm-hmm. But people are also entitled and allowed to think that it's trash.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, that's called the consequences, or the, that's consequences of living in the world. Like everyone's going to have their own opinions on what you're doing.
Right.
And, does it matter to you or does it?
Right.
To tie it back to the devil, I often think of the devil as being the guardian of Our Lady in many ways. Like he guards the way to her, and she sort of is the secret heart of the craft for many of us in traditional witchcraft, but he's the out there sort of blocking the way. But you have to encounter me first before you can get to
I like
her.
that. Yeah.
That's definitely how I see him. So in a way, he's a gatekeeper in that sense. Like he's making us go through him to get to her. And in fact, one of the pieces of lore that I can say that we have in Fairy is that the witch fire comes ultimately from the witch mother, the Rose Queen, but it comes to us by being carried by the witch's devil. He's the one who brings us the witch's fire from her.
Oh,
yeah.
We have a similar vibe. We have two particular symbols that denote particular mysteries. So we have like a symbol that looks like 3 dots, like this, and it represents 3 drops of blood, or it represents the feminine mysteries, or the sacred water, or the witch blood within our tradition. And then there's symbology with like the 3, but it's referred to as the 3 drops of blood. And then there's a toad's foot symbol, which kind of looks like a stang. So like that, there's a particular rune, I'm spacing on its name, but it kind of looks like a pitchfork, right?
Oh,
and
algaes.
Yeah. And then at the base of that, it's almost like there's a straight line going across. So like algaes, but with an upside down cross attached to it.
I call that the Elfane cross.
Okay, we call that the toad's foot.
Okay.
And it is connected with the sacred fire. So instead of witch blood, witch fire, and the masculine sort of mysteries. And recently I was in conversation with Lorelai and Natalie regarding these symbols, because typically people within our tradition that finish their 3rd degree get one of these symbols tattooed as one kind of an initiatory experience and commitment to, you know, your hard work and the mysteries, but also kind of like in a way, sort of like as a status. And I've been thinking about these symbols because I adore the 3 drops of blood and I feel very feminine. Of course, my pronouns are she, her, look at the material. But I also really celebrate my transness. I actually really adore the fact that like, I'm not a cis woman, nor do I want to be or pretend to be, you know, like I'm really comfortable in my transness. So I think getting the toad's foot, that wouldn't feel completely right to me either, because I'm not really masculine or male. I'm not really completely fire, you know? So I told them, what about if I just get both? Like, and so that's what the game plan is in September.
That's hot. I love that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Nice. Are you gonna,
but yeah, we have a similar story. So
yeah. I think that's one of the more common pieces amongst many different traditional witchcraft lineages. Like that is there for many, many of us, I think. Because I think that's like a foundational reality of what that figure is doing.
Right. Like us. Almost like if trad witchery had tenets, it would be in that list.
Yeah. I love our gods. Our gods are the best. And it's not
awesome because God. Our gods are an awesome God.
It's not because they comfort us. It's not because they make us feel good or necessarily gas us up. Like that's not what they're there to do. They're there to empower us. And that requires, especially in witchcraft, a tearing down before you can be put back together and made wise. It reminds me of that quote from Robert Cochrane. A witch is born and not made, but if one is to be made, then tears must be spilt before the moon can be drawn. For the lady chooses whom she wills to be her lover, and those she loves most, she rends apart before making them wise.
That's a beautiful quote.
Yeah. I mean, he's right. He's 100% right. That's what she does. She plucks us from the masses and says, I like you. Let's fuck you up a little bit. And then I'll make you wise from all that fuckery. Yeah.
Well, if anyone in the chat has any questions, I think this is probably about the time. If there's any Q&A. If there's not, no big. You know, we appreciate hanging out with you guys. I don't know what our next topic is going to be. I'm sure we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll wait and see if any questions pop up. I think I saw a couple earlier.
I can't see the chat from my phone, so.
Oh, I could try doing this. I don't know if this will let you see it or not. I turned it on so the comments will appear on the screen.
I don't see it. No, now I see some of it. Okay. And the questions don't necessarily even have to be about the devil. It could be anything in this wheelhouse, right? It could be anything about traditional witchcraft.
Yeah.
People are dying to know or have our takes on.
Okay. Do y'all's tradition have a divine androgyny? If you can answer.
Yeah. So like, I was referring to that earlier when I was talking about the specific face of the master that we work with, Jenna Glass. He is very much an androgynous being. Often is it traditionally talked about as having the appearance of like a pubescent boy, but the voice of like a young girl. And has the breasts of a young girl that are just starting to develop. So like he's very much mixed in attributes.
Yeah, I would share similar sentiments. Like I feel the devil can be as like a natural, supernatural sort of like shape-shifting entity. Like the devil can appear however they wish. And, you know, I think a lot of times the devil often appears kind of masculine, but I also think that the devil can appear, I've seen hermaphroditical like as well. So, but this kind of ties into this next one too, which I think is a really good one that we haven't talked about. If you haven't already, could you talk about how the devil can take the form of an animal in one's bioregion? I think this is a really great question talking about shape shifting.
Yeah.
Because in trial lore, there's all types of animals mentioned, from black dogs to yellow birds to hares,
black stags.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like Robin Artisan with Alice Cateller. Like he appeared as a black stag that rose up from the land to speak to her. That's actually a form that our Magistellus of the devil seems to really enjoy in Appalachia, as he appears as a really dark stag. We call him the Black Hart, HRT.
Oh, I love
that. And he's very kingly. He's very much has a lot of attributes from his father, the king of the underworld. Sort of, he's wearing them as he's doing that role. I have also seen the devil as a fox locally. I have also seen the devil appear as toad song. It gets really loud with toad song at night here, especially after it rains. And sometimes I'll open my window and let it come into the temple, and it's just like this cacophony of toads croaking in the dark, and you can hear there's a ravine that runs behind our house, and they're all down in there, and you can just this echo of the devil as toad song coming up out of the woods is awesome.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
I would share similar sentiments with like a large buck or stag as like a connection with the devil. There's definitely a lot of other animals that I associate with our gods that I feel like I work more closely with than the devil. Like I feel so close with the white goddess on those summer nights where the fireflies are out, you know, like that twilight dusk type of vibe with, you know, tons of fireflies. I feel very close with her. I also really feel connected with like hair, just in general. I love the hares. I don't necessarily know if I would say I see them as like a literal embodiment in the same way that like with the devil with the stag, seeing that in nature, I mean, it just like takes your breath away almost, you know?
Yeah.
I would also maybe say bear, like black bear maybe as well for the devil. Yeah. Yeah, toad song is great terminology, troll.
That's good to know.
What do you reckon the devil is if Christianity is not the correct word?
I'm not sure I understand that question, but I'll try to speak to it a little bit. I think, to me, the identity of the being that I call the devil is he is the firstborn goddess of the weaver. He's the firstborn of the goddess that is the weaver. Like he is the first spirit born out of creation who has become everything. That's who he is to me.
And then they together.
And then they together like create more of the cosmos.
In
a way. Yeah. So like In our lore, we talk about how God herself brought forth 2 bright spirits, and she perfected them into God, or the Master. So the divine twins come together, and in their union, and their ecstatic union, is the Prince of Paradise born. He is this thing that comes forth.
Yeah, we kind of have a similar vibe in the sense that, like, everything has come from the dark, everything returns to this dark kind of cauldron vibes, Colio, as sort of this great mother who birthed the radiant light. Very similar to the story with like the Gospel of Witches, with Diana splitting herself and kind of being Lucifer's twin, but also his mother.
Yep.
And in a twisted way, also kind of his consort with the grape of Lucifer that is in the gospel. And then together, the black and the red ended up making the white, as the devil is also, Lucifer is Aradia's father, as is the devil, the white goddess's father, but also kind of consort, because the gods are incestuous in a way that's not literal.
Yeah.
But is literal.
Yeah. Because they're not human. They're not humans.
Right.
Yeah.
So we would probably see it as like the red god and black goddess kind of being the parentage of the white goddess, but also them having union with the red god. Christy says, are there any metals, crystals, or gemstones associated with the devil? Does that tie into his lore? It does in Pluto or Hades' underworld mythos. Well, speaking of the Gospel of Witches, as a votary of Aradia, there is a stone. There's a whole chapter, the consecration of the holy stone within the Gospel. And it's basically a hag stone that is consecrated in the holy name of Diana. And in doing so, in making good tragunda, or like full moon rituals, with the consecration of the salt and the wine and the holy meal, the huzul, she blesses the witch with a spirit compact of a red imp, is what it's referred to as, or a red goblin, which is essentially a witch's personal sort of demonic henchman. The red goblins specifically are known to break the legs of thieves and return money owed to the witch. So let's say you happen to work in a trade skill, or maybe you sell furniture that you reupholster on Facebook Marketplace. Allow someone to not pay you back, and your red goblin on your behalf, by your right relationship with Diana, will attack the thief, among other things. But that is, like, I think, a pretty iconic example of how a stone or crystal is used. There's also, I believe, George Hare's talks about it, and I don't remember if it's The Ineffable Name or if it's his other book, but basically there's like a phallus stone that the seed of life is like mixed into on, and then there's also like a vaginal like stone that is inserted and used in those ways. Well, George was talking about using these sorts of sex magic stones in a more homoerotic sort of way, as opposed to hetero sort of way. So, George was talking about his group and their very literal kind of circle jerk conjuration. Delightful read. Just delightful.
That sounds great. I would also add emerald. There's the mythos that when Lucifer fell, there was an emerald in his crown, and it came out, and that emerald became each of the Grail Hallows that are in sort of Great Britain mythos of the chalice, the stone, the sword, and the spear. That emerald changed in them, and then it also ties back into the idea of the emerald tablet, Smaragdina. So I think emerald's definitely associated with the Witch Father as well.
George is watching.
Oh, that's awesome.
George says, hi, lovelies. Hope you're both well. Just wanted to say hi. Loving the videos. Much love from Scotland. Awesome. We love you, George. We love your books. We were just talking about you. I don't know when you came in. Okay, so Bougie says, who's the continuation of 3 Black Goddess? I don't know if we mean 3 or if we mean like who's the continuation of the Black Goddess. Oh, you did mean the. Okay, it's in the chat. Okay. Who's the continuation? I'm not really sure. Continuation.
I'm not sure how to answer that question either.
I would say bougie if you're thinking of this in terms of like RTA materials, the book has, if you go to the back of the year one workbook, there is the year one book of shadows, because our tradition's book of shadows is split into 3 parts for each degree. So you get a third of the book of shadows each year. In the back of the first year, in the back of the workbook, the book of shadows, there are 3 books included within the book of shadows. There is the red book of Azazel Cain. There is the white book of Ishtar Eve and the black book of Lilith Sophia. And within those 3 channeled texts that are channeled from Natalie and Lorelei, there is like the story of the black creating the red and the black and red together creating the white. So I would reference that in terms of like the continuation of the Black Goddess. I mean, we also have like the association of witches within our trad being children of one of the specific triune gods. Not to say that you don't work with all 3 as well as other entities outside of the triune, but we often have sort of a right of claiming. That's where really cool. you are sort of crowned by one, and with that crowning comes like sort of specific responsibilities and vibes. Oh no, it's a statement. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and we see that in fair. Like I talk about how, excuse me, the witch mother is the daughter self of fate. Mm-hmm. That like as a continuation, like she is old fate, sort of made less abstract in a way, and she gains mercy through that de-abstraction. Because one way we talk about the Weaver or old fate is like we call her La Grande Belle Dame Sans Merci, the great beautiful lady without mercy, because she.
Honey, most people just call me Jazz. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but she is definitely like merciless in a way. Like she gives no Fs, and she gives and takes because that's what she's doing, and she doesn't have mercy for you. But the witch mother, she is full of mercy. She is full of love and pleasure and lust and desire, and that gentleness she can give to us to sort of help unknot those knots that come from the binder, the weaver. Another way we talk about.
Yeah, I feel very mercy and severity in a similar way with that. Like when I am in the space of Colio, like there is not like in the sense of meanness, but there is like a layer of severity that she carries that's just very unique to her. That's unlike the trickstery aspect of our red god. And that's very different than, I mean, the white goddess, I have found sometimes her to be even more brutal and like relentless in some ways than the Black Goddess. I don't know. I think some of that probably just comes down to our personal experiences, but trans prophetic rites that we've had. I mean, sometimes our White Goddess has been kind of like mean, like in a playful way, but also a damn bitch kind of way.
When I think of her as the fairy queen in particular, like, I think back to like the story of like particularly Thomas the Rhymer, like, she took him, like he really loved her, but like she took him to this place that was really alien. And then he put all these like, you can't do this, you can't do that. And then at the end of that thraldom, that service of 7 years, she's like, oh, and when you're going, you can't lie anymore. You're going to go back to the mortal world and you can't speak lies. What a burden. Like,
do you think she really loved him? Do you think she really loved him? Do you think that?
I do. I think that their love is very different than the way we think of love.
Yeah,
because
I do too.
They don't have endings like we do.
Right.
When you live in a perpetuitous reality where time sort of loops back in on itself in strange ways, and you don't have definite beginnings and ends, your idea of to love something becomes very different. It's in a way is more whole, but it's also less comfortable. Yeah.
So I feel like this is kind of related, but kind of not related. And Christy, we're going to get to this in just a second because I do want to talk about this too. So for those of you who do know, or for those of you who don't know, I'm a big fat nerd and I play World of Warcraft. And recently I've been initiated into this Kaldori Elven roleplay guild. Super nerdy, super, super nerdy stuff. But so in some of the roleplay material, like as an elf that can live for, thousands or tens of thousands of years, and at one point were immortal before losing their immortality, they do have relations with humans. But like, how does that really work? Because if you're 10,000 years old and your partner is a human who lives maybe 100 years, maybe, like, what kind of relationship do you really have? And like in some of the material, it almost equates it, and this sounds like almost kind of degrading and demeaning, and I don't think it's intended to, but it almost equates it to like the love that we have for our pets. Like, not that we're unequal per se, but I mean, for a lot of people, dogs are a very meaningful part of the family that are very beloved. Like, I see my four-legged dogs as like my four-legged kids. Those are my babes, So just because my mortality might last longer than theirs, like, those relationships have a lasting, lifelong impact still. And how hauntingly poetic is that?
Yeah. And if you think past, like, that made me think immediately of my fetch mate. So, like, I have this story that we've been together through many, many lifetimes, many, many lifetimes. And the thing that we love about each other is beyond our living. Like, he loves me beyond just this body. There's a immortal form of me that he loves that is carried throughout time. And that's this profound thing. Like, to love someone beyond one lifetime, to really be committed to them through many lifetimes, through eternity, that is profound.
And to return again and again. Like, yeah, that's hot. That's really hot.
Yeah. It's not something you see out in our world, in this modern world of ordinary humans. They don't talk about those kinds of lasting connections. But those lasting connections, I think, are something that you can't buy. You can't purchase it out in our capitalist society anywhere. It is something that is very precious and very rare anymore. And I'm really lucky to have had this experience.
So Christy's comment here. It's fascinating how being left-handed, having a clubbed foot, and epilepsy were all associated with the devil in medieval times. People being forced to write with their right hand up until just a couple decades ago. Yeah. I thought that this was a really good comment. We have, I think, just throughout trad witchery, also like the notion of the witch's mark, and like that being a part of trial lore, and it being a mark bestowed upon the witch by the devil, but it also kind of being used as a way to feed the witch's familiar, like the familiar suckling on the witch's mark.
Even in beyond a mythic way, it makes me realize that the witch's mark can be as simple as, so sometimes people who are associated with like what we call the black court have like a physical deformity associated with their flesh body that is a way of like showing that they're a black corded kind of witch.
Like one that they're born with, or one that they inflict upon.
So like usually born with, like people might have like an extra finger on their hand, or a club foot, or a cleft palate. Sometimes that's associated, especially in some more folkloric streams of like, oh, that is a witch's mark there. Like, you have been marked as other, and that will help you further your way of getting outside the hedge.
Oh, because that's interesting.
Yeah, like to be like, even sort of, I could think of being queer in a way as being kind of like a witch's mark, because it allowed me enough perspective to see outside the boundaries that I was given by society, to say like, the story of reality is bigger than this. I can dream more possibilities than this. That otherness, that being marked as an outcast or non-normative, allows us to escape the reality tunnels that we're born into.
Yeah, I would share similar sentiments. I think for me, embracing my transness, like in some ways also kind of feels like a queer sort of like witch's mark, and embracing it and like celebrating it and not necessarily like trying to hide it or be, you know, secretive about it, but really celebrating it feels very red god coded, feels very, especially, you know, in this white evangelical Christian nationalist hellscape that we're living in, feels so subversive and witchy to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And historically, like, the left side is associated with, like, they call it the sinister side. Like, that the word sinister literally means left ways, as opposed to like dextral. So like sinisterness is built into our culture, like as people who are just different. So like there's something our culture finds terrifying about difference.
Yeah. I think in some ways that can come back to, you know, the creation of whiteness in this country. If we're going to go there, I think that's really what it's connected to, because, you know, many European peoples that settled and colonized this land also sacrificed and gave up all their sense of identity to unify under a sort of false banner of just whiteness. Like you were no longer, you know, Italian or German or, you know, Scottish or whatever, which I know that some of these subgroups of Europeans were included later. They weren't always immediately seen as welcome in the white party, if you will. But that's a story of like colonialism and hatred and fear of other, because I mean, this is also connected to where we get like homeowners associations. Like it has affected every aspect of our modern American culture.
And it's all about, like, you know, I've talked multiple times. I'm always talking about how witchcraft is relational and it's not necessarily transactional. That it's not about like, I give you this and you give me that, and that's the be all end all of what we're here. It's more like we are in this together. We have each other's backs in this profound way. In fact, I'm devoting myself to you for eternity. And that kind of throwing your lot in with people makes you someone who rubs against the way our outside world works, because you don't walk through the world being transactional, being just for yourself, being out there to take advantage of other people and exploit them and give nothing back. Robert Cochrane says in one of his letters, like, we can't go hide away from the world. Our job is to be in the world and be a part of it, because we are there as part of the people. We are the other given human skin, and we need to live at the ground level of reality so that we can understand what everyone's going through.
Yeah.
Which is why, you know, I'm okay with being someone who lives in poverty. It's why I'm okay with being someone who, you know, I have a lot of health problems, and that is part of my witch story. Like, it allows me to live at ground level, to see reality without a lot of frills, without a lot of privileges. And so I really understand what's happening in a raw way. Yeah.
It's hard to believe that we've almost been talking now for 2 hours.
I know.
I was just looking at that. You know, usually I prefer to stream for an hour and a half, but every once in a while the conversation just gets so good.
It does.
You know?
It pops. Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts as we kind of wrap this stream up? And anyone in the chat, if you have any topic suggestions for us next time, because there will definitely be a next time, feel free to leave any suggestions down below.
I think the devil for me is mostly or primarily about the liberation aspect. That all those other things that he is bend us towards that breaking free from the binds that constrict us and keep us from our holds. And that is essentially my primary relationship with this entity. Is I want to be free, and he's going to help me get there.
See?
Yeah.
I feel very similar. I feel, you know, the initiatory aspect and the passing of the witch fire from devil to witch to witch to devil, from devil to witch to witch to devil, like, and the flames that are shared between witches as well, like igniting each other's witch fire,
Mm-hmm.
and also igniting witch fire in the hearts of others, like those that come into the tradition and are given witch fire through, our gods facilitated by our clergy. Um, and I agree. I think that liberation, and like a breaker of chains, very devil card and tarot reversed
Yes.
sort of vibe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love the devil. I feel like this is a topic that like I return to again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
So this was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
thank you everyone in chat for hanging out with us and giving us some great questions. Again, if you have any suggestions or topics that you would like Troll or I to cover, feel free to leave them down below. Where can people best contact you, Troll?
Instagram is the best place to get at me.
Okay.
Yeah. My
I'll try to
Instagram
make sure
name
I
is
have that linked in the description as well.
it's Sorcerously is my Instagram name.
And also, best place to reach me is probably Instagram as well. It's exactly my name as you see here. So yeah, anyway, until next time, y'all, blessed be. And we will see you in hell. Bye.